Well, at least it does. Kinda. I have no idea when was the last time I didn't care about the show I was going to watch as much as this one. Not I didn't want to watch it, I just didn't care for it at all. Since the series was first reported, I was like, what? Why? What? Then I heard it was going to be the most expensive show in the history, and I was like, what? There is also a thing of Tolkien fans being the absolute worst and trying to scare everyone away from the show before it even came out. And the trailers were just kinda there, not trying to cause any emotion. They just existed. They weren't bad, they were decent, but they were like, So with me not caring about this world at all, there wasn't anything exciting or intriguing about this show except it will be the most expensive show in history. How will it succeed or fail is probably the most interesting thing about it. So the question is the show as bad as people say it is? No, definitely not. Is it good though? Well, this one may be complicated. I was really afraid of one very particular thing going into this show. Well, by making it the most expensive of all time, there is a lot of pressure. And as last few years have shown, the shows that sell the best are the ones that have the biggest levels of mediocrity. Not trying, and by not trying, they didn't offend. Well, some of them at least. Not making anything creative, but not offending anyone enough that they would care. And this is definitely not what I wanted for this show. The same as any other show. I would rather them fail than be boring by not doing anything. I'm done with all this completely vanilla, non-trying, completely mid everything by the numbers bullshit that we've got for the last few years, especially by Netflix. Netflix is just pumping a show like that in what feels like a few hours. I did not want another goddamn Witcher. And you know what? Definitely tried, at least some. This show does not work every time it tries something, because there is a lot of bad in this show. We will get to it, trust me. But at least it wasn't a show that I've already seen 500 times. There is some fun, creative elements to it. And at least they made this show distinct in some fashion. Let's start from how this story is told. This is probably the most basic thing about the show for most of the time. 4 mostly separate stories. But at least each of them show not only a different part of the world, but they all try to be a little bit different in terms of tone. Not much different, but at least a bit different. One is an adventure, you know them, you like them, you know Frodo and stuff. One is a revenge story. One is a survival in face of sure doom. And a weird intrigue slash scheme slash something weird. I think it was a decent idea on paper, because at least it gives something dynamic to these absolutely lengthy episodes, and it's at least a reason to get through them. The pacing of the show is very slow, so this small bit is the easiest reason why would you want to get through them, because at least there is some differences. You are not completely bored throughout the runtime, so I guess it's something. So how good are the characters? Well, mixed. Galadriel, who is definitely the most important character, is sadly probably the worst one. They really did a poor job in terms of writing the character. She comes off a bit one-dimensional, despite Morfydd Clark trying her best to give her some character in spite of the script, but I don't think her work is enough to save this character. I hope they give her something in season 2 at least. There is a room to grow. Clark is definitely doing a good job, and I think she can do much better with better script, but in season 1, yeah, it's not great. Elrond is an interesting case. When he is in his natural habitat, which is, when I think about it, less time than you expect, he is the most boring character in history of anything. But when he's around, the absolute MVP of this season, who is of course Durin, he is walking and talking Mr. Charisma all of a sudden. Funny, really charming, really likable. Not Durin, but still very good. Let's give them more together time next season. Let's make them synonymous. One of them doesn't appear without the other. Please, thank you, for the love of God. Arondir and Bronwyn are so middle of the road. I don't even know what to say about them, except that they are mid. And Nori is a really likable character. Nothing special, but hey, she is likable at least. About the rest of the less important characters, there isn't much more to say, except that almost all of them are pretty bland, except Durin's wife. She is awesome. Okay, let's now talk about my 3 favorite things about this show. First of all, the intrigue / Sauron. For almost the entire show, Sauron isn't really a character as much as he is a looming threat / a force of nature. We don't see his face, we don't know his plan, if there is any, and we don't really know where to find him or how to find him. And they keep teasing that Sauron is a variety of different people throughout the show, and it works surprisingly really well. They build him well enough that you are kinda scared of the fact that he might appear anytime, and you don't really know what to expect or who to expect, why or what exactly is he planning, and it is the most captivating part of the show. The mystery is really fun to follow, and it intertwining with few different storylines, which, may I remind you, are not really about the same thing. There is one storyline about finding Saurons, so teases throughout every story make the entire world feel like one, because without that it seems really scattered and unconnected, and this being a connecting thread between all of these stories is a really great idea that came off really fun and interesting. It definitely distinguishes Sauron in this show as a villain. Second of all is what surprised me the most is how much is this show going with the horror elements. I know it may seem strange, but hear me out. The way the orcs are shown in this show is very different than the way they were shown in the movies. In the trilogy, no, we don't count Hobbit. Hobbit doesn't exist. The orcs, at the end of the day, mostly seemed like a disorganized army. Here there is a lot more savagery to them. They are much more brutal. The way they are only able to come out when the sun is, which in the movies isn't even a thing, makes them seem like a much bigger threat in this setting. Sure, the orc from the movie worked in the movie, but in this show where every battle is smaller, showing them as more of a horror army, I think works wonders for this show. It gives them much more personality and makes them instantly recognizable. This adds a great distinction between the Jackson movies. Third of all, the visuals are absolutely breathtaking. The world looks excellent. The fights are very well directed and choreographed. The CGI is as good as money can buy. In terms of visual palette, this definitely surpassed my expectations. This looks like the most expensive show of all time. Everything looks huge. This world seems massive. So now that we praise this show, let's talk some shit, because there is shit to talk about. The dialogues in this show are fucking unbearable. They are all this weird poetry-esque bullshit, and it completely doesn't work, either as normal dialogues or in fantasy anything dialogues. They are literally unlistenable, and they made this show unwatchable at moments. Maybe that's a bit of a me problem, but holy shit, I hated this so much. Second of all, these episodes don't ever end. Jesus Christ! Every episode is over an hour long, and not a single one should take this amount of time. Maybe except one. There is a lot of filler in every episode. There is a lot of stalling for time, and this makes this show feel like a chore. The episodes take over an hour and you feel every second of it. Really, this show would be much better if at least 15 minutes of every episode were stripped. Probably my biggest dilemma about this show is who is this for exactly? It isn't really for hardcores, cause A, they don't enjoy anything except the books and first 3 Jackson movies. B, it changes stuff that I think everyone would know is big fans of. But at the same time, the casuals may be completely lost because the world building in this show is really scattered and lacks a lot of explanations. If you would want to understand everything in this, you would probably have to Google some stuff, which is really bad. And this leaves this series kinda without its identity. It's not really for hardcore fantasy fans, but it also isn't really for the normal casual viewer who just wants to watch a show. It's a bit of nothing in this case. It isn't favorable for any of the potential demos, which may leave this show kinda without a core audience. Like, as a person who watched Lord of the Rings trilogy, as a person who watched all 3 Hobbits, somehow, I still, for most of the time, had no idea what's going on, and it is a problem when you make a show that is supposed to be like the biggest show in history. It needs to be for somebody, and this show is kinda for no one. Also, one more thing, and this will probably piss a lot of people off, but I do have a question. Can Tolkien adaptations provide really anything new and fresh in terms of fantasy genre? I know, hear me out. Tolkien is probably the most glorified author of the last 100 years. People are riding dick to this day. Fantasy authors, writers and directors included. Most of the Tolkien fans want to convince you that everything fantasy was either inspired or ripped off from Tolkien. Which is probably true, but doesn't that make his work kinda drained? If everyone is inspired by Tolkien, which looking at all the fantasy movies and TV shows from the last 2 decades, people have already picked those books apart and took everything good from them. Probably the not good stuff too. Tolkien can't provide anything new to the genre, cause he is the genre in a way. People took everything from him for so many years that maybe they just took everything. And the Tolkien adaptations constantly fail to make themselves feel like the original. Don't get me wrong, I really like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but kinda a problem about them is that they also don't feel like they're the adaptations of the Allfather of the fantasy. They just exist on their own, which just makes this show kinda just another fantasy, for better or worse. But let's just go back to the show, shall we? Do I think this show will be a success? Sure. Will it be big enough that it would be worth making? Not a chance in hell. This show is too expensive and too dated of an idea to earn this amount of money. Streaming changed a lot. What feels like at least 5 years this show was made. One show these days won't make a platform. Even HBO had to realize that trying to survive only on Game of Thrones is a horrific idea. And a lot of stuff changed on Amazon Prime. In particular, they already have a flagship show. The Boys became their flagship show. They don't really need this one. I think once they realized how much money they are going to lose on this show, they may just pull the plug. We will probably see season 2, but I wouldn't be so sure about season 3. But let's ask ourselves again the question from the beginning. Is this show good? Well, yes and no. Yes, it has a lot of great elements, but it does take a lot of else. I can't say that I enjoyed it much, but I can't really say I didn't enjoy it either. I would say it's a strong 5 to a light 6, something like that. But hey, if you have a different opinion, if you have something to add, or do you just want to discuss the show, I would be more than happy to have a discussion in the comments.